I'd like to welcome all of you for the 127th meeting of the SLLS, which is the Sri Lanka Literary Society, which was founded as far back as 2009. I'm one of the founder members and I'm very proud to introduce today's meeting, which will be chaired really by Satya Ariyanagam. I shall do some housekeeping announcements before that. Sati will introduce our distinguished speaker, Mr. Austin Fernando. And then Mr. Fernando will make his presentation, after which Sati will conduct a Q&A, and we'll wind up the meeting after that. Okay, Sati, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mahendra. Let me start by thanking both Ruan de Soisa and Mahendra Gonçal Corrale for making it possible for today's presentation and discussion possible by our guest speaker. I make no apology for making somewhat a long introduction because the caliber of Mr. Austin Fernando is such that he deserves a full introduction, despite the fact that most of you will know him. But what you may not know is the sort of gentleman he is. We are, in fact, delighted to have among us a special guest, a household name in Sri Lanka for his role in the civil service, including a stint with the foreign service as well. Mr. Austin Fernando has a very long CV, the highlights of which are: he was secretary to the former President Mr. Maithripala Sirisena. Prior to that, he was governor of Eastern Province and also the High Commissioner to India at one of the most crucial times in the history of Sri Lanka. I'm referring to the long and damaging civil war. Those of you who have followed the sequence of the war will know how Mr. Fernando used his skills to avoid calamities at the height of the war. We are rather privileged to listen to him because in Austin you have not only a civil servant, but a complete officer and a gentleman, representing humanity. In fact, on hearing about his guest appearance today, one of my good friends, Priya Ganapati, sent me this text, which I shall read out. Mr. Fernando spent some time in the early phase of his career with my late father, who was the Assistant Commissioner of Elections. Mr. Fernando is a nice man, an honorable man. I have known many Sri Lankan civil servants of class, known for their competence, knowledge, and flamboyance, but never someone described in these terms. Herein lies the uniqueness of Mr. Fernando. Let me briefly touch on why he excelled. He excelled because he represented the common man of Sri Lanka. Hailing from a simple background, starting life in Hikkaduwa, he completed the university degree with a bachelor's qualification, commenced life as a teacher, appearing for the SLLS examination, a highly competitive one where only the brightest, the cream of the talent, make it, and he was one. When such people from such backgrounds reach the top, they do not forget their roots and remain connected to the people, for they understand the problems of the deprived man and the have-nots. He was also very human in his views pertaining to the long history of the ethnic strife that has been a scourge of the country. The chosen topic for today is civil officers, masters or servants. It was conceived prior to the election, but today it has developed into a more pertinent, more important question as the political landscape of Sri Lanka enters a new phase. I'm sure Mr. Fernando will enlighten us with the answer. Before I formally call upon Mr. Fernando, may I have your indulgence on the format of the presentation. Let Mr. Fernando complete the presentation, and then we will open the floor for discussion so that you can come in, post your questions, observations, and even challenge him should you wish. Thank you very much, and over to you, Mr. Fernando.
Good evening to everybody. I think you are having good afternoon for you all. Thank you very much, Dr. Arya, for the very generous and lavish type of introduction you made on me. The situation is that after the whole program is over, our members may sometimes blame you for having introduced me in that very lavish fashion, because they are frustrated after listening to me. Anyway, it's a challenge you are taking up. It's okay. Thank you very much for inviting me and for the nice introduction you made on me. When Dr. Arya spoke to me and when he asked me to speak on Sri Lanka, whether the public servants are masters or servants, I was wondering why this question is asked from me, from a person who is in Sri Lanka, and most of you all are living in London or in England for that matter. So I thought that one reason could have been that your friends, relations, kith and kin have told you that the public servant in Sri Lanka is not very efficient, not very effective, and their representations are being ignored and they are not being responded well. So therefore, they are frustrated, and they know that when a politician speaks on their behalf, things happen. So therefore, the public servants are the servants of masters. Of course, public servants had been a very tricky introduction of a public officer, because some people have been telling us that we are public officers. Some people say we are public servants. Some people say we are state officers, and but anyway, it's all the same. Secondly, because of the bankruptcy of the economy in Sri Lanka, people started querying how the bankruptcy took place. And they thought that it was the creation of the politicians and some ministers of finance and the heads of states. And even the Supreme Court found that some of the heads of states are responsible for that. But at the same time, they said there are some other public servants also in that group of people who created the bankruptcy situation in Sri Lanka. So therefore, people thinking that these guys, the public servants, had been serving the ministers as their masters, not the people, not the public as masters. Therefore, this question is very relevant in that respect also. And then even politicians say that public officers should connive with public servants should connive with the politicians if they are to make any corrupt practices. And in fact, the three former presidents, Chandrika Kumaratunga, Maithripala Sirisena, and Ranil Wickremesinghe, they were invited by the Institute of Chartered Accountants for a discussion. And at that discussion, President Sirisena said that no minister or head of state can do some corrupt practice without the connivance of the finance director or the chief accountant of a ministry. And then I expected the audience, which was full of all the chartered accountants, to protest about it, even to hoot the president for that matter. But what I heard was everybody was clapping on the statement made by the former president. That means more or less like saying, yes, we are there. We are there with you in those activities. So these are known to people, and they say that public officers are servants. They are only servants of politicians, and they are not mastering their own powers and all that. So that's a type of feeling they have it. And then there is another reason. Even some of the services that are rendered by public servants, which are very essential to the people of the country, maybe it will be asresuma, it may be the passports, it may be medicine. We find that politicians have been bungling up certain things, and the secretaries of ministries and various heads of departments and their deputies are taken into custody. For example, if you take the former health minister, his involvement in some drug racketeering, importation, procurement. So then the secretary of the ministry was also taken into consideration. Some of the director and some deputy director and various people in the NMRA, they were taken to custody. So quite naturally, people think there's some reason for the police to have taken these people into custody, and therefore they have been stooging. So this it's a very reasonable type of thinking in a way when you look at it that way about the relationship between politicians and the public servants. But then I must tell you that for getting ready for this presentation, I looked at the history of the relationships between politicians and the public servants in this country. I went even up to the level of checking it up during the period of the British who were here, the colonial period. So, and I found that the politicians have been having some sort of a say in the management of affairs in the public service even at that time. I have a document which I collected from somebody here. That is a gazette notification that had been published in 1909, long years back, where when the British were here, when the British were managing our affairs here as a colony of the Queen of England, we had the Queen or the King. He appointed the governor to this country. Governor appointed the colonial secretary, and the most senior officer was the colonial secretary with colonial treasurer and colonial auditor. These were the people, because the situation was they were trying to maintain law and order and to generate revenue from us and to be taken back to London. So therefore, they had that. And then they had 4 grades of civil servants. That is, one is class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. The class 1 civil servants were control of revenue. Once again, that revenue generation part were government agent of Western and Central Province, those 2 provinces. And then they had the government agent, grade 2 government agents were in Northern Province, Southern Province, Eastern Province, and Northwestern Province. And the officials are principal customs, collector of customs, postmaster general, district judge God, district judge Kurunagar, inspector general of police, registrar general, land settlement officer, inspector general of prisons. These are the senior officers who were there. So that showed that their interest was on law and order, maintaining law and order. All these officers were either getting involved in law and order or in revenue collection to the state, to the kitty. So these people, there were four grades of civil servants who were there, and then the governor had all the power. And then what was the governor doing? Governor was bringing in the political authority of the king or the queen on the colony. And what did he do? He appointed people on this. But later, when we had the committee stages, and later when we had the Colebrook Commission somewhere in 1827 or so, then they had another set of people. They made public officers, appointments of public officers. Now, in these, while these appointments are made, in one place it says, they said these people were appointed, and the local division people were also appointed, and the promotions were given not merely on seniority, but on the merits of these people. So, like that, they were bringing in various inputs to the public service. But the most important thing is these people the colonial secretary, he was not a minister, but when the ministers were started, when the ministers came in, they had another way of looking at it. Of course, this is not nothing new to British, because if you take the history of public administration in the UK, it starts from 1853, where the famous the Sir Stafford Northcote and Sir Charles Trevelyan. Now, these two gentlemen have produced a report, and this report gave various qualifications to public servants. Now, I will read out one of the portions from this particular report. It may safely be asserted that as matter now stands, the government of the country could not be carried without the aid of an efficient body of permanent officers. Now, this report thought of permanent officers in the public service, occupying a position duly subordinate to the ministers. Now, they were thinking of public officers, but they are subordinate to ministers. So I will show you how it has happened in Sri Lanka also after mentioning this. And then they say they are directly responsible to the crown. Now, the ministers, like in England, the ministers are appointed by minister. There's a parliament, the ministers were there. Ministers were responsible to parliament, and the parliament was responsible to the queen. So there was this hierarchical order of people being responsible to the political authority. King is also a political authority in a way. In Sri Lanka, when it comes, I'll show you how it differs from what your position. Then they said, yet possessing sufficient independence. Now, this in England, they thought that it should be there. And in Sri Lanka also, that type of independence was there until about 1972. Of course, it was deteriorating from 1956 downwards after Mr. Bandaranaike became the prime minister. There were incursions into the administrative systems. But definitely, there was fair amount of independence even at that time. And experience to be able to advise, assist, and to some extent influence those who are from time to time sat over them. That is, they were thinking that these people who are public officers, this particular report said that this is the way how public officers should be. Now, when you take it that way, when the accountability part of it is taken, a public officer is accountable to the minister, minister is accountable to the parliament, parliament is accountable to the queen or the king. That is because kingship was there in the system. But in our case, we had the kingship situation where we had for the king there were the last kingdom was in Kandy. I think Santuruwan Mantu Bandari is there. He knows better than I do about it. There were three arms in the Kandian kingdom. One was the king's personal services. They use the singular terms. I'll use them. Mahavasala Seva. That is the services of the palace. Now they were Batvadana, Saluvadana, Diyavadana, Bulatwadana, Dugganarala. Dugganarala was not ombudsman. Dugganarala was the chief of the security section, and Apuhamis were the people who were supportive to Dugganarala to look after the king. Then they had Sattamis and Kukkangmadua, then Sudaliya and Marualiya. That is, those are the people who were the Angampura and rest of it, fighting, training and all that. These serve the services. Then they had the departments. Departments are meant to they say Kurue Badda, that is about the elephants. Then Kottal Badda, there is about supply of arms and ammunition. Then Mahabadda, that is for cinnamon income raising. Then Lunubadda, Vibadda, Madhiyabadda, that is about logistics and trade. So these were there. Then when it came to regional administration, then they had this, there were two adhikarams who was in Udagampaha and Pallegampaha. And the Pallegampaha was close to Kandy, the areas like there were Rate Mahathurus in that area, where we had Udunure, Yatinura, Kundasale, Dumbare, etc., etc. Then we had the Disavani, where the Disavis were there, then Ratiralas were there, then Vidane and some other officials were down there in Duraya, and various people were there in that system. Now, all these people were finally answerable to the people, like in the British system, where people were appointed and they were responsible to the parliament and to the king. Likewise, here also, these people from junior to senior people, they were answerable, and they went on like that. So therefore, even in the colonial system, our public officers, I call the public officers within quotes, the public officers, that the people who serve the government, the king's government, they were responsible in a hierarchical manner up to the people, up to the king. So since we don't have a king in the 1947, when the Salisbury Constitution was discussed, it was passed in House of Commons in 1947, although we got independence in 48. Then in that constitution, some of these things, if you look at it, in the constitution, Article 60 of the constitution says, the appointment, transfer, dismissal, and disciplinary control of public officers is hereby vested in the Public Service Commission. And later it says, the appointment, all that is done, it is done under section, it is by the Public Service Commission will do that, and not the President or the Prime Minister. There were some appointments which were made by the President, like the Attorney General and rest of it, they were appointed by the President. So therefore, what happened was, because of the situation, of course, there was some independence, which will go along with the famous report which I was discussing, that people should be appointed in a different manner. But when it comes to 1972, Constitution, this particular thing changed into a different setup. Section 106, it says the cabinet of ministers shall be responsible for the appointment, transfer, dismissal, and disciplinary control of state officers, and shall be answerable therefore to the National State Assembly. Mrs. Bandaranaike's constitution took the whole thing from the Public Service Commission. There was a Public Service Commission, but the whole authority was taken away from the Public Service Commission to the cabinet of ministers. Now, when the cabinet of ministers do that, then quite naturally, the cabinet of ministers will go on the trust which they had. The trust was also mentioned in the North Court Trevelyan report. They said at that time, they said their solution was to establish a system of career civil service with entry into the service, a carefully selected body of young men whose promotion and future prospects depend entirely on the industry and ability, that is efficiency and effectiveness, on which they discharge their duties. Entry would be through competitive examinations administered by a central board, and the rest of it, they go on like that about making in 1854, when the report was published, they were thinking of that type of public service. Now, that was the same thing which we expected to have in the 1947 Constitution, where everything was done by the Public Service Commission in that manner. But when it came to 1972, it said, subject to the provisions of the Constitution, the Cabinet of Ministers shall have the power of appointment, transfer, dismissal, and disciplinary control of all state officers. Then they said, then the heads of departments, every appointment was going to the cabinet. And then they allowed the PSC to do certain other activities at a different level. So then when this was done, this was by a Marxist group of ministers were also there. But they were the people, the Collinari Silla, who made this particular, this thing, it is called the Collinari Silla's constitution. Then came the next one is 1977. Now, that one, when it came, it remains even now. We were called state officers. Now, we were called in 1947, we were called public officers. In 1972, we were called state officers. Then state officers, but they said we are servants of the Republic. Anyway, we are servants of the Republic. Servants. But then public officer, we were called public officers in 1977. The interpretation in the ordinance said that anyone who is paid officer from the government is a public officer. So therefore, this public officer, state officer, or public servant, all these are talking about one particular person. And then we have been having this whole problem on. And then when you say whether we are masters or servants, even in the UK, people who are in the UK, they would remember that in 2020, we had permanent secretaries. We had 12 of them, permanent secretaries, and some senior civil servants. 2020, we had 12 of them, permanent secretaries or civil servants, equivalent to seniority, left their posts. And then Treasury Permanent Secretary Sir Tom Scholar left his post on the day when Right Honourable Elizabeth Truss became the Prime Minister. And this was widely considered a sacking. And if someone says it is not sacking, I have a reference to this one where the Guardian newspaper of 12th September 2022, there was an article, why is Liz Truss sacking top civil servants? Because she wants to suppress dissent. Now then comes the reason why ministers and public officers or state officers or public servants, whatever you call them, all complementary to each other. Why the public servants become servants is because one thing is constitutionally we are servants. We can't say we are independent. Even there was another report in England Armstrong Memorandum in 1985, which was changed in 1987, and then 1996 the status was changed. In that they say that the Armstrong Memorandum describes it as having the public servants having no constitutional personality or responsibility separate from the duly elected government of the day. What has to happen is the duly elected government is there. Public servants should carry on with their policies, implement their policies. That is their job. So therefore, quite naturally, unless you have trust with a public officer, you can't do that. So politicization and intervention and various words are interference. Various words are used for this one, but only thing is there is some sort of animosity that have been created amongst these two groups in certain cases, but it is not necessarily in all cases, because somehow they try to manage themselves, politicians and this one. So the role of the public servant as advisor and a person who will guide the politician is not always there, because some of these politicians are so experienced. There's hardly any way of experience in advising them and to get them to understand what you think is right. And some people are so much novices, they can't understand it. So sometimes you have these problems with these people. I'll tell you, if you want me to come out with some good stories, I'll tell you one. In 2018, after the local authority elections, Mahinda Rajapaksa's party, SLPP, won about 42% of the total votes and that amount of seats in the local government election. Then this made people think, some people think that they can win the presidential election because 42%, you have to get only 8% more to win the election. And then by that time, there were little bit of, from 2015 to 2018, Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, and the President, Maithripala Sirisena, they were not seen eye to eye on various other issues also. There were so many issues for that, which I need not be saying here. And then they had this problem. And then some of the people from the SLPP, they tried to convince the president that we can sack Ranil Wickremesinghe from the premiership and get Mahinda Rajapaksa to be the president. This is in March, end of February, March, somewhere there. So when this happened, this was brought to my notice by two very eminent people, Jayadev Uyanggola and Jayanta Dhanapala. And they were insisting that I get involved and tell the president that he should not do this, it will create a lot of political problems to the country, not because they are interested in Ranil Wickremesinghe's future or whatever. So then I found that it is right. What they was telling me was right. And then I got at the Attorney General, Jayanta Jayasuriya. Later, he was the Chief Justice, and he retired last month in December, he retired. So now, this gentleman and I discussed, and I said, I'm going to tell the president that he should not do that. And will you come and back me up about the legality of it? He said yes, and two of us went. And we went and told the president that he should not do that. If he does that, I told the political and administrative issues, and Jayanta Jayasuriya he explained to the president about the legal aspect of it. And the president agreed on it. And he didn't sack him at that point. But in October, once again, of course, he sacked him for whatever reason, I don't know. And he got thrown back by the Supreme Court, and proving that Jayanta Jayasuriya and I were right in our advice. So now this is advice which I could do. But how many secretaries of ministries, how many president secretaries, how many heads of departments are in a position to do that? So if you can do that, you become the master, and president minister becomes a minister, not the servant. You see. But if you are incapable of doing that, it is that the problem is they may not listen to you, and they may do the wrong thing and get into trouble. So therefore, whether the opportunities are available for public officers to go and tell that, whether the trust is there in a minister about his people. Now, what happens is, with the change of government, all these things go haywire. Now, the problem is, now we take the Prime Minister, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's secretary was there, Saban Ekanayake. When he became president, he became the secretary, and the president secretary was thrown out, and he was there. And then now Mr. Anurukumar Dissanayake became the president. He throws him out because no trust in, probably no trust, or thinking that he will not be able to carry out our thinking. Then this happens to ministers, secretaries. Secretaries are only secretary who was not changed, I think, is the Minister of Finance Secretary, Mahinda Sriwadana, because he was the man who was running the whole, working on the IMF fund. So if you throw him out, a new man has to come and start anew with the IMF, so he cannot be thrown out. So he's there. But all the other secretaries were changed. So why and how these things happen is a matter. So it all depends on the political this thing. I know when I was sacked from, I'm one naughty public servant who have been dismissed from the public service thrice. I am sure that Dr. Arya now must be thinking that he had been saying something wrong about me, about my goodness, about being a good public servant. Or why should I be sacked thrice? I was sacked, and first time it was on a wrong information that I got. Second time it was because the president took over 3 ministries, and then she took over the Minister of Defense from Mr. Marapana, who was the minister, and he had to sack me. So I think because she never thought that I'm a trustworthy man for him. So now when it happens, then they bring people. Then they bring people of their own choice. So, of course, she brought in a very decent gentleman, Cyril Herath, but not always. Sometimes it is not so. So, therefore, these people are making comments about various people. about president secretary, defense secretaries, or something like that. Now, for instance, defense secretary right now is a person who was in the political campaign of the president. So he had the full trust of him. So therefore, he's been there. Although some people criticize that it is not the done thing, it is in a way right, because you must have a person who is very faithful to you. And so he has got Tuja Konta, the new president secretary there. So that's nothing wrong. I don't find it as a wrong thing. But people say, how can a person be there when he was in politics? But can't help it. People are in politics. All of us are in politics in whatever way. So then we had other things happening in the public administration part of it. Now, for example, under the 13th Amendment, we had the chief ministers being appointed, and the chief ministers they appointed secretaries, and secretaries, they have a appointment of secretaries to the chief ministries, various other ministries in the provincial councils, was guided by a circular that had been issued by Mr. Mahengee in 1987 or so, about how the ministers should be, how the secretaries should be appointed. So there are various systems that have been employed by the public, by the departments in doing that. But the problem is that the changes that are taking place, in dismissing people or recruiting people or promoting people are questioned under every government. Even under the present government, people are questioning, and this was questioned even earlier. And there were, for example, in the government sector, there were some people called the advisors who have been taken into these departments and the ministries and the president's office and all that. And there were about 180 or 170 people during Mahinda Rajapaksa's time, and 92 people under Ranil Wickremesinghe's time. But of course, this government has one thing, in fairness to the government, I must say, they have said you must appoint only at this salary, and then these are the facilities that can be given. And there was a specialist in that area. You can't bring your own relation as the advisor and keep him in office. So like that, there are certain stipulations that are coming right now, which are going on the correct way. Now, having said this, I must say that we as public servants have undergone various changes of constitutions, changes of new institutional building, and changes of politicians also. Because the elitist politicians who were there in 1948, coming up to 56, they were from a different class of people. Even the Marxists who were in the opposition were people who were very well educated, coming from the elitist classes. Peter Kahneman or N.M. Perra or Polinari Silva or S.A. Wickremesinghe, all these people are elitists as much as D.S.A. Nayak or some other person who were there in that system. So therefore, there was this elitism in both, and the public servants also could work with a fair amount of confidence that there's trust in you. But then after 56, when the Sanghaveda Guru Govikam Karu, the 5 Panchamaha Balavegas were brought in, there were people who were coming to the parliament as members who were from the non-elitist, we are common man's crowd. And they found that the public servants who are on top, secretaries or heads of departments, they are a set of fellows who don't listen to you, who want to argue with you, who don't care you. And then they brought in pressure on the government. And this bringing pressure finally came up to a point in 1941. Of course, that was before independence. Also, this the state, the colonial government thought that there should be changes, but later the changes were made even by the Bandaranaike government in 1972 when they brought this constitution. But one thing, there's a habit, even we public servants always blame Mrs. Bandaranaike for making us servants of ministers by giving our appointment power, appointment, promotion, and the rest of it being given to the cabinet. But they had in their system, they had two committees. They had two committees in this one. One is State Services Advisory Board. Without the consent of the State Advisory Board, a minister cannot take up some matter about the public servants in his ministry. A minister can't take up matters in the cabinet because it says a recommendation of the State Services Advisory Board should be there. And the other one was called the State Services Disciplinary Board. Without that, you can't do anything. But in 1977, when Jayaja was brought in this thing, he erased off these two institutions so that ministers can take whatever they want to. And of course, when ministers when ministers are given that power, sometimes they bring in their own people who are known to them. We say, I'm a MP coming from District A, where I know the government agent, he was very faithful to me and I had trust in him. So when I become the minister, I want him to be my secretary. But probably he is not fit to be a secretary, but he comes there. So that may happen. That happened earlier. It may happen even now. I don't want to say anything very adverse about the current government. But then we had the experience in the previous governments, people who are junior, who are not having enough experience, people who don't know how the procurement procedures of high-level things coming into big ministries, where shipping, trade, or something like that, or Mahaveli, or something like that, where people just are brought in because the minister has faith in him. And then it gives you another aspect of public service, where the ministers would like to have their faithful man because of if they are engaging in corrupt practices. Because as President Sirisena said, a minister can't rob without the consent of without the connivance of the finance manager or the chief accountant or whoever you call, whatever name you call him. So therefore, likewise, I know I have experience in it. For example, there are tender boards, then cabinet appointed tender boards, there are review boards, and various boards are there. Finally, when the final decision is taken, sometimes ministers are reluctant to sign the cabinet paper to get the approval of the cabinet for unknown reason, and we know what the unknown reason is. So therefore, if you have the proper person there to help you, then you can do that type of thing. So therefore, juniors are brought in, inexperienced people are brought in, and this was in the Armstrong memorandum. They were mentioning about these things, that these should not happen. But then, although it was written in 1985, Armstrong report was written in 1985 to answer a question in the parliament from the Prime Minister about the relationship between ministers and the secretaries. So, although they say that, but this happens. So, this is one issue which has to be looked at when we make appointments and when we promote people, when we dismiss people. Sometimes the goodness of an officer is not considered when they want to discuss. And it goes on sometimes. I know for the first time when I was removed from my office, it was on a wrong information that has gone to the president. I don't blame the president in a way because the wrong information giver is the person. But then the president also should have asked me what it is. It was never asked. It was never asked. It was I think it was a common right any citizen has. A public servant also has right to be heard. I was not heard, but I was sacked. And that once you are dismissed by the president or in your country by the prime minister, there's no place to go and appeal because secretaries are not appointed after interviewing people and all that. They are appointed only on the whim and fancy of the. In Sri Lanka, it is the whim and fancy of the president. So he appoints, he dismisses. So there's no way out. So therefore, when you have the fear that you can be thrown out any moment on correct information or wrong information, you tend to be, because you have a family to look after, you have the children to look after, you have a status to maintain. So all those things go away. But then, but of course, when they are sacking people, they don't consider all these things. They just dismiss you. And I remember when I was dismissed from the secretary post of the defense secretary, when the ministry was taken up, I have to go because I am not there. Yeah, but then I get a letter saying that today I am removing you from the office of defense secretary, as if I had done big wrong to anybody. I have not done any wrong, but anyway, that's the way how we are treated. So that's not a good thing, because in the UK, for example, some of the gentlemen who have been thrown away from the post, they are lords and things like that. You see, so that way it is a little different. But in some other countries, of course, if you take, for instance, India, although there is this type of change of positions like this, there are the people who have been there in who had been there in the public service are in various other groups, some think tanks and things like that, where they contribute to the government's activities which they are taking up. So therefore, it is from country to country, it changes. From president to president, the stances you take the stances you take are changed, and the way how you are treated is like that, you know. And the thing is this: when you work very closely with the minister, it is very easy to tag you with that particular party or with that particular gentleman. I have been a victim of this, all that. Now I'm not the least bothered about it, because I'm at this age of 80, coming to 83. I don't want to be doing any job anywhere. But when you are young, when you are tagged on like that, it is very unfair. Unfair in the sense, you know, it's a very frustrating. So it is like that. People are taken out, so people are scared. So if people are scared, then you become, if you want to be surviving with your own other commitments in life, you have to be in a way succumb into some pressures. But then don't think that it is a pressure. This pressure is legalized. It is constitutionalized. When you appoint the present constitution also, that also says that under section 55 of the constitution, 55, it says once again, the cabinet of ministers shall provide for this thing, and then appointment, promotion, transfer, disciplinary control, and dismissal of all heads of department shall be vested in the cabinet of ministers. So if a head of department doesn't get a chance of convincing the cabinet that I am doing this, I am proposing this for this correct reason, if I cannot prove that, then I get knocked off from my job. Because when the cabinet paper is taken, other ministers don't consider all your theories and all norms and all reports, the British tradition, or those things are not considered. You just keep quiet when the man is chased out. When I was chased out, it is like that, and other secretaries, when they were chased out, it was like that. No one would go and even speak to the president and say, "Sir, why did you do that? It's wrong." So no one, because the president is such a powerful personality, and the minister is such a powerful personality. No one wants to speak on your behalf. I remember when Mr. DBRP Siravadan, he was one of the great administrators whom he had. One day he was having a chat with me, and he told me he was removed from his office by Mr. Jayajavadan's intervention. The Jayajavadan wanted him out, and he was sent out from some particular post, not a secretary, some other post. And he was put to there's a thing called the SLLS pool, which is the pool is not a place where you go and meet people and all that. You have to go in the morning, sign a book, and when you leave office, you sign a book. For about a week or two, you will be able to go to your colleagues and meet them. But after 1 or 2 weeks, people think that this fellow is a nuisance. He is coming, they look the other way when you start going that way. When I was put to the pool, I never went to the pool. And next morning, I sent the letter of resignation and chucked up my public service career like that in 1996. But how many people can do that? Because I got a job. I was issued with the letter at 4:30 in the afternoon. By 7 o'clock, I got a job in the private sector, so I could do that. But how many others can do that? And then I was never asked the question. I was never asked the question. Then Mr. Sirivardhan told me when he was removed, it was only Mr. Upali Gunaratna, who was another colleague of his, who used to come and speak to him. And even the civil service people also, they were not coming and speaking to him, because you become a leper when you are chased off like that. So the fear of becoming a leper, public service leper, haunts you when you are working in a system like that. And usually people don't speak out, but I unfortunately or fortunately, I had a habit of, I think, a bad habit of arguing with people, and I used to argue with for example, with Mr. J.R. Javadan also. I have won over sometimes. Sometimes I got defeated. I have won over Mr. D.B. Vijayatunga, but failed with him once again. With President Sirisena, I have won over, but I have failed in some other cases. Where you are telling a very reasonable thing also, sometimes presidents or prime ministers or ministers may not listen to you and be very positive about what your trustworthy secretary says or the head of department says. So therefore, I disagree with, I don't think that we are servants, but we are made servants in some cases. We are made to be servants, and we are bound by constitutional and traditional and political reasons for public servants to be some sort of subdued, subservient individuals in public service. It is a very, very unreasonable way of treating a public servant, but it is there. And then, as I said, even under the colonial system, there was some sort of influence which was there. I quoted the colonial secretary's gazette notifications. I quoted the reports of 1853 downwards. Those reports also gave a bit of handle for the politicians to maintain that status quo in treating public officers. So I think I have spoken nearly an hour, I think about 55 minutes non-stop. And in my old age, I must not be tiring myself anything further. And anyway, I once again thank you for inviting me and listening to me. Of course, you can ask any question which is relevant, and I may come out with some other experiences also. But I think Sandruan is more savvy to political situations. So let us see, and Saroj also, Dr. Saroj, I think, these are people who have been very much bothered about systems change and all that. He's an expert on that for that matter. So let us discuss for the next 1 hour or even more about anything arising from my presentation or anything relevant where you would like to be hearing from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernando. I think you have been very, very realistic in your presentation, and we are very grateful for you to have been so candid, not only with your views, but also your own personal experience, something that not everyone will be able to or will have the courage to do that, despite the fact that they are retired. So once again, a very big thank you to you. Now, maybe I will have the privilege of kicking off with the first question before I entertain others. You mentioned about, I'm actually now playing devil's advocate. You mentioned about the points of view or opinions being differing from that of the minister or the person at the top. Now, it could be the opposite also, isn't it? It is not uncommon, particularly on a global scale, whether you take Sri Lanka or a developed country, for people, or in particular, the men at the helm of power, say, for example, a minister, accusing the civil servants of being obstructive to their policies. Now, I'm going back to my school days when the sort of civil servants that you alluded to, the flamboyant men and women from opulent backgrounds, public school educated, and so on. Now, they had their way of even trying to twist the arms of the minister, for example. Now, I take it that perhaps it was an experience in the past. Does it happen, or did it happen during your time? If I go back to the times of Duncan D. Alvis, Neville Jayavira, Paskaralingam, Mahadeva, they were all top-notch men. Nonetheless, it used to be alleged that they ran the show because they wanted their views to prevail, particularly if they differed in their political opinion. For example, if you are right of the center and the minister is left of the center, then there is a little bit of a problem. Nonetheless, as you said, one person wins. But in the past, did the civil servants of the 60s, 70s win over the ministers?
I think that's a very good question. As I told you, there were the civil servants were also elitists, and the ministers were also elitist in a way. And they were very formal. Most of them were British educated, and who knew the systems in other countries. And then they were very gentle on that. But then it was not the same thing. I remember when 1960 or so, when Mrs. Bandaranaike came into power, and then there was a gentleman by the name Edwin Vikramaratne. He was the first person to go and assault somebody in an AGS office. But that never happened before 60. We never heard of a politician assaulting a public officer in his office. So that's the type of, yes, the change is not only in the public officers. Change is there in the politicians also. Now the situation is very, very wild for that matter. Now, even for a simple reason, people will just walk into a division secretary's room or government agent's room, and they come in this thing to the president's office, and they have been thrown out, and then they are beaten charged, and sometimes tear gas canisters are thrown at them. But this was never heard earlier. It was never there in that case. So therefore, it's a matter of attitude also. Attitude of the politician and attitude. So then this is all these things happen to make them subservient, make them fearsome about what they are doing. But then I had the experience of arguing with President Jayawardena on the phone one day when he rang me up and asked me to do something to favor one of his people. I protested and I said this can't be done. But then he understood it. But then the other guy would not stop at that. He will go and push him to do something against me because he doesn't want to take the defeat when a president wants it. But usually, if you give a reasonable excuse and explain to them, politicians they listen to you. But the way how you do that, you must never show partisanship to some other person when you do that. So it's a talent of the public servant also. Now, for that matter, if we in case of permanent secretary and these one thing is that those days we had permanent secretaries. The secretary will not be thrown off just because the minister changes. He may continue with the new minister also. But now it doesn't happen at all. There's no permanency, number one. We are not called even permanent secretaries. We are called secretaries. And the secretaries are not permanent, and in literary they are not permanent, and in fact also they are not permanent. So that is the situation in case of that. Now, for example, in the British system, you had, I will read it out from one of the documents I have. It says the permanent secretary is normally the accounting officer for their department. Accounting officers are personally responsible for the efficient and effective management of the organization and are directly accountable to Parliament, particularly the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee for the stewardship of the department and resources. Where a minister wishes to pursue a policy which the accounting officer views as infringing these principles, the accounting officer may request a public ministerial direction that the policy should nevertheless be pursued. That can be done even here. But what we do is when you try to convince the minister, and if he doesn't do that, we don't go and tell the minister to give it in writing, because then that becomes a little bit of a very, very rash type of behavior on the part of a secretary. What you do is you come back to office and write in the file a minute to say you order your subordinate to do something. In that you say, the minister rang me up at 9:37 a.m. today and he wanted this done. I explained to him that it should not be done, but he insists that it should be done. Carry on. So that type of ways of doing things are there, but it is very rarely that we do that because but if the the former Secretary Health wouldn't have been in the lockup for so many months, had he got the courage to tell the minister, sir, you can't do that. If you do this, it is wrong, and this is not the way procurement. So they must do it. And if you don't do that, you pay for it. That is what he is doing. Now he is paying for it, and we are not paying for that. For a longer period of service, we are not paying for any sins of that nature, but that guy is paying. So therefore, you must be in a position to tell the president, the minister, even the president, even the prime minister, you must be in a position. And I think if you tell them very nicely, in good language, very diplomatically, they will listen to you. I think most of these people listen. But there are some people, I don't want to mention names, there are some politicians who will not listen. They will say, no, you must do it, So the other way about is to say, here's my letter of resignation and go home. How many of us can do that? It's a very difficult decision to take.
Thank you very much for that response. And perhaps I will just go on to a supplementary question and open the questions to the floor. In the light of what you have told us, do you think there is, or is there scope for a review of the civil service for reforms in Sri Lanka with this government?
Yeah, this was they thought of in 1970s or somewhere there, late 70s or so. There was a commission report headed by Mr. Dr. Shelton Manasinghe. He was a very senior civil servant and who had been working in the foreign agencies also. He did that. Now, in his report, he has given certain ways of handling the public service, civil service, and even the institutional reforms. He has said that, but of course, no political authority wanted to pursue it so well. That is number one. Number two, there are certain reforms that have arrived on our tables because of other political reasons. The 13th Amendment, for that matter, is one where it came up because of political reasons and the military problems, but then it is not being properly advocated by any government. People are trying to whisk away some powers that have been given, and various underhand dealings are there. So if you want to reform, you must you must go for reforms with the heart to reform. If you don't go without a heart to reform, you will not be able to do that. If you have underhand thinking, under the table you think about helping some party people or some group of people like that, then it is not there. It may be there even for judicial appointments or public service. They are not public service, but anything, even secretary's appointment. If you want to support people from your party or your people who are studying with you in the university or who are doing the masters in something in some other university or foreign university or something like that, if you are going on that basis, well, then the reforms are not coming from your heart. The reforms are there to pursue your own thinking of what it should be.
Thank you very much. And if I may just interrupt the proceedings for a moment to have a chat with Mahendra. Mahendra, I did see the chat box message about the session being not recorded. I forgot to tell you, Mr. Fernando was keen to have a recording. So does it mean that we are recording it, or is it only Zoom that is recording it?
Sathi, there was a problem initially because I didn't have the power to record because the host had to log in, but that has been solved and Ruan logged in and I'm recording. But
Okay.
I think we missed the very beginning of his talk, unfortunately. But most of it is there. And we are now recording at the moment as I talk.
Okay, thank you very much. And my apologies, Mr. Fernando. I should have mentioned it at the beginning, but
No
I just saw the chat box message. Okay, thank you very much once again. And perhaps it's time for the participants to throw their questions. You can send your message or you can raise your hand and come in. Can't see any hands, but just unmute yourself and ask the question then. Oh, there is one. Udita is there. Okay, it's your turn, Udita. And then there is Kawan also, yes.
Hi, thank you for that talk, interesting talk. I got several questions, but I was a bit concerned when you said that there is no role or the role of a permanent secretary is not there. Now, if I look at any department, you get a history of that department, the way how things are done, what has been done in the past, what are the protocols, and all those things are extremely important. That sort of thing should be carried forward by a permanent secretary. Now, if you say that that role is not there and you get a complete outsider as your secretary who doesn't know anything about the department, who doesn't know the protocols, who doesn't know what contracts have been made, what the vision of the department. I mean, that is very, very concerning for not even a very small organization. And I'm just wondering why you said that. I mean, if that has been scrapped or for a large extent, it's a very, very worrying situation. But you can get your secretary, any Tom, Dick, and Harry who doesn't know anything about the department or any workings, and if he comes and tries to dictate to rest of the thousands of staff, that is not a healthy situation. So that is one. The other thing you said that some secretaries, private secretaries, are scared because of the job, the security, the finances, and therefore they will do what the minister says. Is that the caliber of the people we want? The thing is, from wherever they have been plucked out to become your secretary, if they are chased out from that secretary post, isn't there rules and regulations where they can go back to their previous post, so that financially they may be slightly worse off, but they still have a job, and because most of these people will be educated people. Isn't there a system where, because you are being plucked out to be a secretary of a politician, but he had a job before, he would have had a government job. If he's chased out from that secretary post, he should be automatically should be able to go back to the previous post. Therefore, he will continue to have his financial security and things like. And it's people like that who will not bow down to the wrongs of the politicians. If you see, if the secretary is that your total future is at the hands of this crooked politician, that is very bad for the. That's exactly what happened to Kahelia's secretary. Now, he, as a secretary, if he had refused to, and this is a very good example for all government service, they should not, they should be able to stand on their feet on moral things and procedural things. If any the secretary or any other person should be able to take a moral stand and a professional stand if the minister goes out of line, and they should be protected. And I'm so glad that Kahelia's secretary is behind bar, because that should send a message to all secretaries: you must follow the procedures, you must follow the protocols, and you should not be the servant of the politician. It's one of my first question.
Yeah. Now, first of all, I must say that I think you have taken me wrongly. What I said was there are no permanent secretaries now, because that had been knocked off in 1972. After 72, we didn't have permanent secretaries. We have secretaries. Now, secretary is the chief accounting officer for all the monies which are voted by the parliament under the heading of that particular ministry. So therefore, those things are happening. I don't think there's any problem of that nature about the secretary's role. He runs the departments. He runs finally, he's accountable for the monies which they have spent. He has to go, if he's about a corporation under him, he has to go to the corp. If the Public Accounts Committee, he has to go to the Public Accounts and explain to the Public Accounts Committee. And if it is sometimes necessary for him to go to the Parliament Finance Committee, you have to go to the Parliamentary Finance Committee and explain. So the role of secretary and the appointment of secretary, the post of secretary is there. So therefore, they take the responsibility of running their departments. They are about their money, about their establishment matters, about their protocols. He is the man who is responsible from the bureaucracy, number one. About the caliber of secretaries, the caliber of secretaries we had. Now, I have been working under people like Baku Mahadeva, Lakshman Dimel, MDD Piris, he is still living. The others are now dead and gone, of course. Pascal Lingam. Now, those names which you mentioned, someone mentioned, Dr. Arya mentioned. Now, those are people who came from the old civil service and who had a lot of experience in the system. So without experience, if you bring a man, what you said happens. You can't stop it. You know, if you bring, now for example, I will say the positive things. Now, presently I hear the present Secretary Agriculture, he had been brought in, probably for whatever reason. He had been the former Provincial Secretary in Agriculture, and he had been Additional Secretary somewhere there in the government. He knows how a secretary should work. And I think, although he had the problems of paddy purchase and various things right now, those are not his creations. He's trying to sort out the problems in that manner. But sometimes someone may say it is not so in case of some other ministry. I don't know, because I don't want to say anything negative of the secretaries, because all of them are some of them are my subordinates and some of them there. I don't want to be naming them. But there are people who are critical of some of the secretaries who have been appointed. So, well, whether now, for example, I'll take another positive one. The industry secretary, Tilaka Jayasundara, is considered a very straightforward, straight-up person. And she had, I mean, when Chamara Sampath was the deputy minister in that ministry long time back, she said no to Chamara Sampath and said, "You're the state minister." He said, "No, you can't do that." And he stood to guts. And she was transferred to education ministry. What should have happened was, she shouldn't have been transferred. They should have taken off the state minister who is asking for a wrong thing. But then it doesn't happen, because politically it is something which is not very feasible for politicians who are presidents. It is not the fault of the secretary. But then I'm telling you, those two cases I'm telling you are very positive things under the present government. Previous governments, we have had people who were, now for example, if you have multi-million-dollar contracts with foreign companies, then having a person who is just promoted from the government agent to the secretary's post, definitely he will have a problem. He will have to depend on people who are in the racketeering group of the particular ministry, that particular project. So therefore, you have to be very careful. So I think in appointing secretaries, I think there should be some sort of a evaluation of people who should be done. Whether it is intentionally or not, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. Then about the moral position, yes. Now, when I was transferred to the pool is the place I told you, you don't have a table and a chair to go and sit. You are just thrown off. Now, when I was thrown out of the position, what I did was, I sent in my resignation paper. I could do it because I just gave some few calls to my friends outside, and they found me a job. Within 4, I got the letter into my hand at 4:30 in the afternoon. By 7:30 in the evening, I got a job within 3 hours. But I told the people around 12:30 when I got the message. So has everyone got that capacity to get a job? So that is a different kettle of fish. So people are scared now. If I was also scared, thinking that I would not get a job, then definitely I would have thought otherwise. But then people don't get those opportunities. And especially right now, after a bankrupt situation, people don't get jobs in the private sector also, like what I got. So therefore, there's a problem in that. About the returning to the post. Yes, if a person is in public service and if you are appointed secretary, you are not sent home. You are told to get back to the Minister of Public Administration, who will put you somewhere which is possible for you to get a job. So sometimes you are trained in, we'll say, land and agriculture work, and the vacancy is in probation and childcare. So you are put there. So you have to accept it and go, because if you want a job, otherwise you can be in the pool, drawing the salary, but without any perks like vehicle. There are so many perks of being a secretary, and those things are not there. So people don't like that. People don't want to suffer like that, and they just go. And then about say, take the case of the health secretary who is in prison now. He should have told the minister, as you said, "Sir, you can't do that. This is wrong." Because there are procurement procedures that have been worked out, and it is in black and white. So you can always say that. But he didn't say that. If you don't say that, you pay for it. If you say that, sometimes you may have to pay by if the president considers that as a reason for you to be removed, then that's a different story. So it is not the fault of the officer alone. It is the fault of the minister. It is the fault of the president. It is the fault of the president secretary who has to put up the papers. It is the fault of the officer. It is the fault of the system. So many things are there, and so you can't just scope it into the officer alone. It is a combination of various bad things in life.
Thank you. I mean, Kahalia Secretary's situation must be a very good wake-up call to
Yes.
all in that question, because it is not only the politician, but the people who are directly under him are also responsible, and therefore I'm sure it must be a very good wake-up call for everyone. I hope
I
that
agree. I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And I hope, but one thing, the present government, in fairness to the present government, I must say that the ministers have been very open, saying that we are not up to mischief. So I think that's a very good situation where you can go and tell the minister, sir, you can't do it because they are not up to mischief. You are at least at present we are very satisfied the way how they have been, and especially so because there are some people who have become ministers for the first time, novice ministers. They also must learn to listen to the secretaries and the other advisory people and the circulars and manuals that are there to work out, especially in procurement.
But Mr. Fernando, if I just go back to Udita's question, you could also make a case for the secretary being so dumb that he wouldn't have known the implications in relation to the legal aspects. He would have just thought, well, he will sign it because the boss is telling me.
Yeah, I think you must. I don't know whether we can reach him on the on the Zoom. It's a matter where he should say why he did that. Maybe that he was not aware, as what Mr. Udit said. Whether if you didn't know what the format is, then you can't help it. Then it is his fault. Because when you become a secretary, you must learn how to handle it. When I went as a secretary defense in 2001. I had no experience as a defense person. I have been reading Iqbal Attas's we can column. That's all I knew about the secret. But I slowly started looking into various systems and things like that. And at a certain point, I could tell the army commander, look here now, this I will not agree with you. This procurement I will not agree with you. Why don't you look at this way? I had the same when I was secretary president. Of course, I am not a lawyer, but when the lawyer lady used to come and tell me, I used to question her. Because I knew the constitutional law part of it about provincial administration. I had a very good knowledge. So I used to ask her, challenge her, and then get the correct thing. So you must learn how to handle now. For example, now the digitalization process is going to take place. President Anur Kumar Dissanayake is very keen about it. So if you are going to do that, secretaries will have to learn how the digitalization process takes place, the pros and cons, how it could be misused. They have to learn. Without learning, just because you are a secretary, you are not prone to learning. You have to learn. So if you don't learn, you will pay for it.
Thank you very much. I'll invite Kawan to come in.
Yes, thanks for a very interesting lecture. I'm asking a question which is slightly out of topic, but I'm sure you know it. It is about documentation. If you go to the National Archives and look at documents about 100 years ago, you find lots of information you can use to research what happened during that time. But if you go to the National Archives and ask for annual reports of even 20, 30 years ago, some of the annual reports are there, some of the annual reports are not there. And if in America, when a president leaves, there is all this, the presidential papers are archived where people in the future can go and research them. What happens in Sri Lanka? How much of the decision-making can be researched by people because those documents are at some level put into the archives so that you can go and do research about some era in the future, even after a certain period of, you may not want to lock them up for 10 years, 20 years, but is that documentation being preserved from minister to minister or president to president?
Mr. Aptatha, you are asking a very, very, very interesting question because there's a law, the Archives Ordinance, Act or Ordinance, I can't remember. It has a section, I think section 16 or 11 or whatever section, that says that every document which is published, that is any report which have been published, should be, it may be a presidential commission report or a committee report appointed by a minister. That report should be sent to the archives department within 3 months by the secretary to that particular committee. It is not the president or the prime minister or the minister who has to send it. It has to be sent by the secretary to the committee. And these annual reports, of course, the ministry has to send it. There are some official committees which have been appointed about agriculture or wildlife or whatever. Then those reports should be sent to the. It is a legal must. It must be done. And if it is sent, they are being kept very well. I know the present Director General is one Nidra Rupasinghe, Dr. Nidra Rupasinghe. She is keeping it very well, and the place is open for people to go and ask for these things. But I must say that sometimes some of the reports, when they are read by the people who appointed them, maybe the president and president secretary or some additional secretary guy must be reading that report. If it is going to expose some people who are little bit questionable, questions can be asked. Sometimes these reports, these people don't adhere to that particular legal obligation. So if that is not done, then that report will not go. I don't want to mention the name of one report which I know. That report, I was interested because I went and gave evidence in that particular commission report. I went and gave evidence for 3.5 hours. One day for about 2.5 hours, the next day for another 1 hour. I gave 3.5 hours of evidence. So I was very keen in seeing what is the outcome. It is not there. The report was not there. When I became the secretary to president, I asked the person who is handling this subject whether they have it. They said, no, it is not available in the presidential secretariat. I spoke to Nidra Rupasinghe and asked for it. She said it is not there. She checked up the computer, all the reports, and said, sir, it is not available. So what happened to that? Now, therefore, if it is not there, then you can't get it. If Mr. Rattate wants to see that report, I don't want to mention names because it is not, then I will be giving ideas to you about who could have been instrumental in hiding this report. It is there. So therefore, that is there. But only thing is, some of the reports get delayed by years. Now we say, sometimes you may not have the report of something for 2023. Sometimes the report has not been prepared by the secretary of the ministry or the head of department or whoever. So if they are not prepared, then that report is also not there. The first report, it was done, it was handed over. There was photograph and newspaper items to say that so and so handed over the report. It is there. Then third one is, sometimes people misunderstand about some of these papers. I know this because the Bank Commission report, Central Bank scam report, I was secretary at that time, and when Justice Chitrasiri and company, they came and gave it to me, I was the man who went and participated at the handing over. Now in that report, it says appendix 1, 2, 4 and 5 are there, but appendix 3 is not there. So the politicians, in the report itself, the Justice Chitrasiri has said 1, 2, 4 and 5. 3 is not there. Now the MPs, once again, I don't want to mention names because some of them are known to me personally very well. They started the hell of a big hullabaloo about this, and they said, where's the 3? This Annex 3 is not there. The presidential secretariat has, they don't want to put it out because it has very important information about this whole thing. They are hiding things. And then they were alleging that we were trying to stop people learning what had happened. But then Justice Chitrasiri, I spoke to him and asked him. He said, no, it was never there. This was a mistake made by somebody who has prepared the annexures. So Annexure 3 is not there. So if you go and cry till the cows come home, we can't give it because it is not there. It is not an existing thing. So therefore, there are so many complications about it. One is there is no report. Therefore, you are crying for it is no use. Second thing is it is there. It was there, but it is not there. So that is number two. Number three, these annexures and all that, all those things, originals have to be handed over to the government archives. Even the Attorney General or the things which are being brought up to courts and all that, all those things are copies of it, certified copies. The originals are with the Archives Department. So I believe Archives Department is having a good, they look after things well, and they are very scientifically looked after also. But of course, there may be certain documents which are really old, which can be, but they have, I think, put it in the computers also. They have got it scanned and all that. It is there. So to answer your question, well, if you want them, if they are there, you can get it. If they are not there, if they are not there because they were not there at all, like the Annexure 3 of the bond scam report. The other one, which was handed over to the Presidential Secretariat, it had never gone to the Archives Department. It is not available in the Presidential Secretariat also. So it is like that.
I agree. I have spoken to Nadira a lot, and she's a very good archivist. But what she says is that from about the 1980s, a lot of the annual reports were never written because I was interested in a particular wildlife annual report. It was not in the archives. I phoned up the department and it was not in the department either. What happened? I mean, this seems to be another rot that set in around the 1970s and the 80s, where departments were not forced to write annual reports before they got the next year's funding, which should be the case, right? I mean, private institution cannot get money without publishing an annual report, but it seemed to be that government departments could get away with it by not publishing annual report, and they carry on. So why was that sort of thing happening in the public service?
No, I am not very sure because I have been head of department for the last time. I was a head of department in corporate department. I was there for 4.5 years. I wrote my reports without anything. You can find them. But only thing is, if heads of departments don't do that, well, it's a secretary's job to pull him up and say, let me have the report. So if it is not done, well, I think the importance given to that is there. But for money allocations, that report doesn't matter much. It matters very much for the evaluation of the performance of that sector. It is very much there. For example, if you take the agriculture, say Paddy Marketing Board report or the Agriculture Ministry report, they should be in a position to explain some of these things which are in the public domain right now.
Unfortunately, I have been dealing with the central bank and asking them for information which is older than 10 years old. And they tell me that they don't have anything, even about the currency notes that they have published. So it is, they request by right to information, and they have replied to me officially by right to information, saying they don't have this information about currency notes which are still legal tender. So, which is very surprising. I think, I inquired from the National Archives about it, and they said they don't have it because the central bank has not sent it to them. And I get an official legal document saying they don't have it from the central bank. So I'm sort of shocked because if you go 100 years ago, all that information is well documented and archived in the National Archives. So we have deteriorated in that respect of not keeping things when it is much easier now with the computer system.
Technological development there is such that you can always do that. But of course, there's one reason. I think one thing which has happened is what the old civil servants like D.B.P. Siravadana or Lakshman Dimel or Baku Mahadeva, the jobs which they had weren't, I think the amount of involvement in day-to-day administration of the ministry and the departments has tenfold increased right now, or even more, because the If you go to when we had the DRO's offices in I think in 1960s or 70s, and at present day division secretary's office, the amount of work they do is so great sometimes. But of course, they have a lot of people also for that. I think sometimes more than what they require. More than what they require, they have. But the problem is the efficiency of those people and the managerial skill of the public office, senior public officers to get those fellows to work. It all, it depends on persons also.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Kawan. Mr. Fernando, before I let the next questioner to come in, can I just check with you, are you okay to box on? Because you have done a marathon session for nearly 2 hours. It's 1 hour and 45 minutes.
I can.
I have one. You can?
Can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. If you want to have a cup of tea or something, please do. Help yourself. You can have a short break.
I had a coffee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Bengu, come in.
Hi, thanks, Sati. Thanks very much. That is a brilliant presentation. So coming back to your presentation, I have a very quick question. That is to do with the organization of the civil service. Because you gave some examples from UK as well, where people were fired, as you said. Doesn't Sri Lanka have a position called head of civil service?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in your case, in the UK, you have the cabinet secretary who is I think now it is Simon Rose or somebody, I think, no?
Yeah.
And in our case, it's the president secretary.
Right.
Earlier, it was the Secretary of Treasury. When I was taken into public service to the SLLS in 1967, I was taken in. It was Jinda Samarakkudi who was the head of public service. And then the training and all that, the SLIDA came under the Ministry of Finance, that is under the Treasury. So now it is the head of the public service is the Secretary President. I had been one for 1 year.
Right. So in that case, what sort of a relationship is there, like in terms of line management or like firing and hiring type of relationship between the head of civil service and the rest of the civil servants?
Yeah, I think if you are thinking of the secretaries, hiring and firing, as I said earlier, secretaries, those days, secretaries were permanent secretaries, and they were permanent. And then therefore, when a minister goes out, still that man is there, unless the Secretary of Treasury transfers him to some other ministry and get another person to come into that particular ministry. So that was the way it was more or less permanent. You are there as the secretary. But after 72, this particular situation changed and we became secretaries. The moment we became secretaries, it is the whim and fancy of the president to appoint you as the secretary to another ministry. So he can take you out, because there's no permanency, like the name, as the name indicates. So therefore, then what happened was, the officers also started pleading with ministers to get them appointments as secretaries. There was a time when the secretaries were appointed, some people on top were thinking, we must have the representation of Tamils or Muslims or something like that as secretaries, because it is not the capacity of a person, because we had to be thinking in terms of those things, because otherwise the politicians will come and say, oh, you have not appointed one of our creed as a secretary or something like that. That is one. The second thing is some officers, I must say, it's a shame to say that, but it's a fact that some officers started canvassing for secretaries' positions either directly to the presidents or indirectly through ministers. I know of a certain case where somehow we were told that some person has to be appointed, and we appointed. So that person was senior enough. And some of the advisors who were in that ministry, who are our colleagues in SLLS and all that, they used to telephone and tell me, what is this? I was not a secretary, I was only an advisor like that to the president at that time. During the Yapalani period, they said, what is this? You have appointed a person, and there's so many people coming from the World Bank, UN, and all that. This particular officer, the secretary, doesn't know how to speak in English to them and explain the situation. She looks glib when those people come. It's a wrong appointment. So, but you can't help it because some people have come and pressed for that. I know that the same thing happened to another minister. That person, when we appointed the person, everything approval, everything sought and given, and suddenly that minister comes to the president and directly goes and says, no, I want so and so. Because that is a problem, you know. Probability because the word trust they had on that particular person. But the trust is not the only thing. That is one thing. Even now, there are allegations against some of the people about the trust. They have the full, total trust on people, but not the qualified person. And especially in big construction, there is a highways ministry or the agriculture, irrigation, that ministry. We must have people with a lot of experience because a lot of inputs are coming from outside. I'm not saying anything about the present holders of the position, but that type of ministry should have people of that nature. For example, now we have a good secretary finance. I always say that for positive things. He's a central banker. He had been handling the IMF well. So and I think that's an appreciable situation. But if you don't have that type of capacity, they should not go and accept that. They should not accept a secretary's position if they are unable to deliver. But then it has so much of status and all that people don't think in those terms.
So basically what you're saying is the head of civil service role doesn't have much of a meaning, isn't it? It's like because they don't have any power at all. Just because you are the head of civil service, you can't, because it's the minister eventually who does the.
No. It's not so. It's not so always. There are cases I know when we appointed a secretary to one minister, two ministers of the President Sirisena's cabinet. Those two ministers came to me. I was not the secretary. I was one of the advisors, but I was in that committee of people who were deciding on secretaries. So they came and told us that we want to change of secretaries from this particular sale. But I said, no, this guy this is the background of the fellow. He had performed so well in such a place, he had done this and all that. And they were convinced and go on. But every minister is not convinced of it. You know, there are people who don't listen to other people's point of view. So it's not the fault of the head of the public service. And if the head of the public service don't know people, then that is another problem. That is, if you have appointed the wrong man those days to the Minister of Finance, nowadays to the President's Secretariat, well, that's a different story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mahendra, it's your turn now.
Thank you. I want to just ask a question about the relationship between the minister and secretary. If the minister wants the secretary to do something which the secretary knows is highly irregular and wrong and improper, one could just do it because you have been asked to do it. You know, that's one thing. But the proper thing would be to not do it because it's wrong, improper, irregular. Now, if the secretary then tells the minister, sir, I can't do it. This is wrong. According to this ordinance, that not. You ask me to do something thoroughly wrong, improper. I cannot do it. And he said, no, look, you're secretary. You do as I say, right? I ordered you. What can the secretary do? Can the secretary appeal to somebody and say, look, I'm in this position where my boss wants to do this, but I can't. It's against my principles. It's dishonesty. You know, and he doesn't want to resign, saying, oh, in that case, I'm resigning. He wants to put it right by telling the minister this is wrong. Can he appeal to high authority?
I think I can tell you. This is not a private secret. I have put it in my autobiography. The story when President Jayawardena was there, I was a junior person. I was only 44 years old, very much junior to become a secretary of activities. One day he rang me up and asked me to do something which is wrong. So I said, I can't do that. Then he asked me why. Then I explained to him why. Over the phone. He is not calling me to his office. So over the phone, he's asking me whether there's the other guy who wants that help done is after him, you know. So he asked me and I said, no. But of course, I knew the president personally well. When I was GA Polonaru and GA Nureli, I used to meet him and I have known him personally. And but then he's insisting that I should do it. Then I insisted, no, it can't be done. And I told him why. And then at one stage he asked me if I change the law. I said, read the law. Then he said, if I change the law, what would you do? I said, I am a good public servant. I will carry on with the law if you change it. I had the guts to tell that, you know, as a young fellow. I consider me as a young man because it was in 1984 or so. I was only 42 years or something like that. So I said, I can't do that. I insisted that I can't do that. Then he asked me whether I can get an appointment for this gentleman to go and see the particular people of the other place. I said, yes, I will do that. And I did telephone and got the thing done and everything was done and informed this fellow, you can go and meet him at such and a place. So, and he didn't do anything harmful to me. Of course, there had been some attempt, but it was shaped up by, you know, I tell that also. When there was something was going to happen to me against that, Mr. Gamani Jayasuriya, the minister, when he was told about something, he defended me. Imagine the minister defending a head of department, not the secretary, head of department. Dharmasiri Piris was the secretary. And defending me and saying, no, why don't we do it this way, that way, and somehow he shaped up the matter. So it's a minister who knew about it. Luckily, minister knew about it. Because I wrote to, when I declined to do what President Jayawardena told me, there was an officer seated with me when the conversation was going on. He said, sir, this is not a simple thing, you report to the secretary. Then I reported to the secretary. Secretary took it up with the minister. And minister said, of course, now you have done it. Well, let's see what will happen. And when the bad thing was to happen, he stood for me and said, no, he didn't say, don't do it. He said, sir, we will do it this way. Came out the thing which cannot be done, which will not happen. So somehow it's the ministers also should have the courage to tell the president, like what Mr. Gamani Jayasuriya said, the great man he is, what he did. So whether we have ministers of that nature everywhere is another problem. You are, if someone says, you know, the head of department or the secretary must tell the minister, I can't do it. Then my question is, why not the ministers go and tell the president, don't do it. My officer is right. They don't do that. It was very rare occurrence of a man like Gamani Jayasuriya who stood for me. So it is like that. But if you can't do that, there's another way. You can always say, well, I can't do that, sir. I will find my way out and go and tell the president secretary, look here, I will tell you another story, good story. There was a chap, he was a secretary. One day he rang me up around 1:30 in the afternoon and he said, sir, I want to come and see you. I was secretary president at that time. I said, come along. No, I said, why? Is it very urgent? Yes, it's very urgent. I said, come along. When he came, he told me at a certain place where he was going for that particular meeting, he had gone there twice. And the second time when he went there, when he was asked to do something wrong, he said no. He insisted that it can't be done. So he explained to me all that. I asked him, are you saying no to this because you are gaining something from the other party? Because this is about a contract. He said, no, sir, not at all. I said, okay. In that case, you go for the meeting and you stand by you. You say just you can't do that because it's wrong. He said, sir, they will sack me. They threatened to me. Last time they said, you will have to find a new job. I said, okay, let them say that. If they want you sacked, you have to send a letter to the president. And the letter will come to me. When he addressed to the president, it comes to me. I will tell the president that this is because he was asked to do a wrong thing and he refuses to do it. And therefore, that is why. I will ensure that you are not thrown out. You see? Then I said that. And The man went there. He said no. Then they changed him from that particular committee and did some jugglery. I don't know what happened finally. And this man was there. I didn't know that all what had happened. You know, it's a heartburn which a person is given. He died of a heart attack. In Canada, he died. His body was brought in here. I went for the funeral. And I was introduced to his wife, who was not known to me. The moment my name was told to her, he said, "Sir, I have heard about you very much from my husband." I said, "How come?" No, he said, "He's the one who saved you are the one who saved his job when he had a problem." Imagine the heartburn this man has. He was in here, his wife and family were in Canada, and he had called and told, "So and so saved my job." But then whether every secretary president would do that is another issue. It all depends on people, and you must always consider it is not the problem of the secretary alone. It is the problem of the minister. It is the problem of the president. If it is about the secretary, if it is about a head of department, it is the problem of the officer, secretary, and the minister. The ministry is the one who writes a cabinet paper asking for some other person to be appointed in his place. So therefore, the responsibility of handling this public service problem lies in many people, depending on the circumstances.
So am I to gain from that if the secretary is honest and he wants to fight his case, he will be able to do that without losing his job? Because even if the minister threatens to fire him, then the word will get out why he was fired, and then there'll be a lot of questions to answer. Or can a really strong minister just dismiss somebody, whatever his principles are?
Yeah, you can't help it. Now, for example, when I was chased off from the secretary post of cooperatives, indigenous medicine, and local government, provincial councils, when I was thrown out, I was never asked a question. What happened was, there was a contract for which someone was trying to play out money. I said, I can't do that. And I told the minister also. Then he said, okay, shall we ask the Minister of Finance to help us out? I said, yes, let the Minister of Finance take it. I can't agree to this. Then this was taken up by another politician who was an acting minister that day, saying that this particular party people, I was tagged down as a UNP. These UNP secretaries, they don't help us, and this is what, and this and that. No questions asked. The order is, I will take him out tomorrow. So what can you do if you don't know that you have to be taken out before the decision is taken by the president? You can't help it. There's hardly any time for anyone to intervene or you to intervene in that matter. So it all depends. That's why I said it all depends on circumstances. It all depends on officers. It all depends on secretaries. It all depends on ministers. It all depends on the president secretary. It all depends on the president secretary. Now, when that Upali Mara Singh's case came, the president secretary stood with him. When my case came up, the Gamini Jasuri minister stood with me. But if all the public officers are like that, there can't be any corruption in the country.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is no formal appeals process as such?
No, there's no formal process. If you are a secretary, you get chased off because the president doesn't like your face.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's wrong. In England, it doesn't happen. I think of course in England, when it happens, they shall I say, they sweeten the issue. They say for treasury orthodoxy, we are going to do that. Or the minister wants to have a new leadership in the treasury or something like that. This is what they said about Sir Tom when he was stationed by the finance minister, Kavarang or somebody, the particular minister. So these are issues. Even in those countries, in England, you have the same type of people, ministers and heads of state doing that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernando. I have another hand that is going up. That's Mevan.
Thank you very much. I joined a little bit late for this conversation. This may be a self-evident question. The thinking behind is that I recall once meeting up with a governmental official. I believe he has some military background from Singapore. And in a casual conversation, it came out that something stuck in my heart even today, that he mentioned that it's so prestigious to become a civil servant in Singapore, highly sought after, respected. And he carried that, maybe he was a military officer on top of it. He exuded that kind of a pride. And that resonated with me at some point because I was the son of a former CAS, a person of my father who mentioned that in his childhood, it was so prestigious to become a CAS officer, however low that position was. And living through late 60s to 70s to 80s, and these are subjective deterioration of this kind of a respectfulness. I think this is a self-evident question in your discussion. There is an undertone when you mention the challenges that you faced as one of the most experienced officers in the country, and you also provided answers. But if I may ask this, because we talk about reform, which is very difficult to do, let alone a simple change, whether it's cultural or attitudes, patterns of behavior between those who have political power versus civil administrative duties. If I may a simple question, if somebody asks you, give the 5 precepts that we can reestablish the pride and respect of Sri Lankan civil servants, whatever the word you use, what would you say, sir, based upon your extensive experience, knowledge, and passion? What's your guidance? What are your guiding principles? Maybe this is a self-evident question again, but it's nice to hear for somebody who had such an extensive experience across the board in the CS.
Yeah. I think once again, it is not only public service that has to be put to the right path. Now, it is very interesting if you look at the civil service code in England. They have four items that have been mentioned as the most important things that have to be maintained in public service. One is the integrity. Integrity, well, we have to, what they say is that you must be above personal gain. You don't gain anything. Now, then the second thing is about the honesty. How honest, how open you are, how truthful you are, honesty. Then the third one, they talk about this objectivity, whether you take decisions on rigorous analysis of things. Things are not you quite impersonally. Whether you can think about it. And the fourth is they call it the impartiality. Whether you treat people in the same way, whether he's X party or Y party or Z party, whether we can think in those terms. These are the 4 values which are there in the Civil Service Code in England. Now, these are same for anybody, whether it is in case of Singapore or Sri Lanka or India. These are things which should be there in that. So if reforms are to be made, reforms have to be engrossed with these things. It should give cover to all these 4 things. Now, for example, if we take one, for example, about the integrity part of it. Now, the integrity levels of our countries differ, change. Now, there was a time when our integrity was considered a little high. Now it is low. But at the same time, Bhutan, for example, it is very good integrity. The Scandinavian countries, their integrity is high level. So why? Because it's a matter of attitudinal change and legal change and rest of it, which has helped them to come to that high level of integrity, that people don't go on the personal gain business. But what happened here is that there was a time when I think it was told when Dalli Nayaka died, he had something like 3,000 or 4,000 rupees in his budget, in his account. And they were, those days, the politicians were called to be people who were spending what they had for politics. Whereas now you come to politics, and become a multimillionaire in no time. I hope this present government is saying that they are not that. I hope they will become the same old politicians of the good old days, if we can. So integrity is one, I can say. The impartiality is another. Then the objectivity, whether we are objective in our decision making, whether we are not doing it because that man goes to church with me or temple with me, we are from the same school, we are from the same caste, we are from the same religious group. So like that, if we are, or are we going to be doing the cost-benefit analysis and things like that? Are we going to take decision? So this is something which has to be inculcated. It cannot be inculcated only by law. But of course, law also has a part of it. For example, when Luca and you in Singapore, when he did that, of course, it's a small area. It's about Colombo district size of a country. So, but then the commitment for that type of thing and the adherence of those people. It is said that some people who were caught, there was a minister, I have heard this, I think, I don't know exact names and all that. I have heard that some minister who had paid out some money, and when he was taken to custody, and he was never, the president didn't involve in the whole thing, and finally that guy committed suicide or something like that. I have heard about some people facing that music. But here it is not so. Sometimes earlier, today the president addressed a meeting in Anuradhapura. He said, we don't intervene in any of those things. Why, that's good. Excellent if it can be done like that. If it can be maintained throughout, it's excellent. But then we have found sometimes our politicians getting involved in it, and then people are alleging that it is happening. And it's very openly alleged. So that's it. And then I remember once a certain politician his house was raided, and they found some narcotics or something like that, and some other politicians went there straight off. I think it should not be done, because that's a lesson which you are telling the public officers who go and catch them. Don't do it, we will look after. The other man thinks, I do it, what can you do for us? So that type of attitude is a total attitudinal change. Reform cannot be done only by law, only by regulations, only by circulars issues. Reforms can't be done like that. Reforms are a much more serious job. And for that, everyone should be committed to be reforming. If you don't do that, if the commitment is not there, forget about it. All these laws and all that are just jokes. Because you take a bribery case, for example, I'll take it. Bribery case, if a person is caught, if the judiciary takes so much of time to decide on it, by the time the court case is taken, when the integrity has to be corrected, the witnesses are dead and gone, and they have forgotten. After 20 years, you come to the courthouse to give evidence, you can't remember, and they go with a good lawyer, and that lawyer proves that you are telling lies to courts. So therefore, then the judiciary also has a role, and then the Attorney General has a role. The police have a role, CID has a role, Bribery Commission has a role. So therefore, if you don't get this thing set correctly, forget about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernando. Again, I can't see any more hands. Perhaps I will, before we close the session, can I just check whether there is anyone who has a burning question? If not, I may ask you just one or two questions in addition to giving your feedback. Perhaps I'll start with an announcement. I have noticed from your CV that you have also done your biography, and I think you have also done another write-up. So I think I have a duty to let the participants know about it. Let me make that announcement. Mr. Fernando has written something entitled My Belly is White, Reminiscences of a Peacetime Secretary of Defense, and this is available with Vijitha Yapa Publications in Colombo. The other one is I Am Austin. It's an autobiography published by Sarasavia publications in 2023. Can I just check, Mr. Fernando, are they singular versions or are they available in other languages also?
My belief, why it is a book which I published in 2008.
Right.
It is about the way how we handle the ceasefire agreement and how we negotiate with the LTT and the rest of it. So it has it is good for people who are interested in the conflict situation in Sri Lanka, because that gives that's a very small book of 927 pages. So you can imagine the material amount of material which is there in that book.
Right.
I don't know, the book is available now because it's 17 years back I published the book. So I don't know whether it is available or not. My daughter Santusha had seen a copy and bought some time back. I also have one copy with me. So that is that. The other book is in Sinhala. It is Mama Austin. I Am Austin is Mama Austin. It's in Sinhala. When I published it last year, 23. 23, I published it. And at that time, we had a shortage of paper, shortage of ink, shortage of colors, shortage of gums, all that. So therefore, the Sarasabya publishers said they can't accept more than 500 copies. On the first day itself, they sold about 200 copies. And then the balance copies are there. Now I want to buy a couple of copies because my friends from abroad, when they come, they say, Machan, can I have a copy of your book? I don't have. So therefore, that book is not available. I am trying to get the second print done now that things are available. So I also didn't have time to be going to the designer and work with him. So I may do it within a month or so with the designer. And if it is published, then you can have it. Right now, Saraswati doesn't have even a single copy. I asked them. I said, I want to buy about 5-10 copies for me. It was not there. So it
Thank
is like...
you. Thank you very much for that feedback. The question I had was this: in the context of some of the participants asking you about the legality of decisions made by some secretaries. Of course, the question is slightly outside your remit, but you may know the answer. That's why I'm checking with you. Otherwise, I'll have to go to a legal person. Now, it is mandatory in many Western countries for judges, when they make a decision, to give reasons. Because if they don't, they will not be let off by making a decision or an adjudication without reasons, A. B, if they do that, they will also be ripped off by the opposing councils. Now, I don't think that happens in Sri Lanka. Do you know whether they have to give reasons?
Usually when a case is heard, there's a report which it is written by the judges. It may be a panel of judges or one single judge. When they do the final conclusion of what they have got to say, it is put in writing. They explain what the case is, what was told by both parties and summaries of it, and their conclusion, and then the determination they give that. So everything is in writing. It may be a long report, it may be a short report. So it all depends on the case, how it had gone. But there had been some cases where, especially in the rights cases, there had been certain cases when they don't permit, I'm not very sure of, exactly sure, because I'm not a legal hand, as you said. There are some people, they don't give some reason. They just say we can't allow it, something like that. So it's very rare, but I don't know. I can't comment about it any further because it's a legal matter. But the other thing, I know that there are cases heard, and when a determination is made, they inform they put in writing all these cases, and they are appearing in some of those cases are appearing in the new law reports those days. Then now it is called Sri Lankan law reports or whatever, and that is there.
Okay.
Sometimes they give, sometimes, but most time if a determination is given, there's a file in that they write it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I have a vexed question. Well, before that, let me give you feedback about one of the statements I made at the beginning when I was introducing you. The person who wrote to me about yourself being a junior officer in the elections department was the daughter of Mr. Ganapathy, the former
He was
assistant.
an old friend of mine.
Right.
I have been a very close friend of his, Mr. M.R. Ganapathy, Murra
Yes.
Ganapathy.
Yes, Priya is now in Colombo. She studied with me, and in that context only I contacted her.
Is he the one who is married to that engineer or?
That's correct. Yes, Arumugam.
Arumugam.
Yes.
I have been to their house, Arumugam's house in Jaffna also.
All right. Okay. The next question, of course, and Tusit also was here, but he may be working. Is no more. Is not appearing anymore on the screen. Tusit Vikrama. I think your good friend's son.
Yeah. He's an old friend of mine. His father is a very old friend and family friend, like a brother.
Right. The question is now with this type of CV, where you have held offices across the spectrum of civil service, top to bottom, all sorts of officers, High Commissioner, Secretary to the President, Governor, advisor to so many people, including presidents, Postmaster General, Chief Executive of National Reconstruction Steering Committee, etc. With all that common touch with the common man, why haven't you gone into politics?
I have not been interested in contesting elections, but I have been into politics. One of your participants, Sadhuruwan Madhu Bandara, and we were working for the UNP at one stage, and both of us have given up. I think I don't know what he is doing, but I have given up working for politics. But I was working very closely with Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe when he was in the lead of the opposition, and then when he was the Prime Minister. And I have been having very close relationship with him. At the same time, I have been to politics when I was very young. When I was about 18 years or so, I was a card-carrying member of the LSSP, Lanka Samasamaja Party. And one man who had been going in May Day rallies as a young boy from that time. The people who went in the May Day rally, there were two people left over. And out of them, one is dead now, Athav Senviratna. Later, he was a minister also. And Vasudevan Anakar, who is still there, but he is very feeble now, very old. He is about 4 years older to me, but he's a little sickly. So I have been into politics at that level. And then later, I had been working with people like M.G. Mendes in the Communist Party. When we were working together, Sabasamaja Party and the Communist Party were working together. Then I was never, when I joined the election department, I gave up all the political attachments because it's not fair and it's not raw, it's raw. But then in 1996, I once again started doing politics when I was chased off from my job by Chandrika Kumarthunga. I went to work with Ranil Wickremesinghe. Now I am not working. I know the present president, I know a little bit. And some of the ministers, leading ministers who are the old JVP hands, I know them very well. But I don't have much to do with them for the simple reason I'm not interested in politics. Number two, in the sense, active politics. I'm not, and at my age, I can't be going in protest marches or whatever, which I used to do when I was a youngster. Number three, I don't think people who knows me, they have time to speak to us or discuss with us. Now they don't have time. And some of the others, like Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa and all that, I don't think they are in very active politics also. So it's a personal choice that I have made that I should be out of politics now. But I was in politics, but not to contest, but to be working for the victory of some party A or B or whatever I have been. And with President Sirisena, of course, two of us have been known to each other from 1975. When he wanted to contest, I stood with him and did politics. Of course, I have been in campaigns. In Maithripala Sirisena campaign, I have been there. Even earlier, Ranil Wickremesinghe campaigns, I have been, but not now. Now, I think it's time for the youngsters to take over, like the Anukumar Dissanayake or Sajid Premadas or somebody to take over and do it.
So you're chilling out in retirement.
Totally retired.
Okay, on that note, perhaps it's time to close. Once again, thank you for enlightening us. Thank you for informing us. And moreover, thank you for being with us for this long. It's a very long session. You have done it for nearly 2.5 hours. I think we should have been a bit more kinder at your age to let you off after 2 hours, but we have kept you, to reach 2.5 hours. So unless anyone else wants to say something in conclusion, perhaps a word of thank you, I will close it with a round of applause. And if you could all unmute yourself and let's do the routine. You're all muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was quite a good experience having a long chat with you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we will come back to you another time. I would be very interested in the part you played in the war, however small it was, because I think that will keep my colleagues informed. And perhaps we can also touch on other subjects. Because I did have a number of questions in relation to the ethnic relations when it comes to SLLS exam. In 21, I read a report saying that no Tamil had passed the exam. Is it because they are all dumb, or is it because they are discriminated and so on? But we will leave it for another day. Thank you.
Sati, can I thank you very much for conducting the session so well and giving everybody an opportunity to speak, be fair. So thank you very much on behalf of the SLLS.
Thank you very much.
Mahendra. Thank you very much.